Let's talk about Trump's 2025 trade policy, a global economic shockwave that sent tremors through every major economy. Overnight, the world's financial centers were thrown into chaos as investors scrambled to make sense of a new era of uncertainty. In July, the administration unleashed sweeping new tariffs on 14 nations, some as high as 40%, stacked atop existing ones. These weren't just minor adjustments, these were historic, aggressive moves that upended decades of trade agreements and global supply chains. The message was clear: retaliate, and you'll face even harsher penalties. Countries that considered fighting back were met with threats of even more severe economic consequences, making it clear that compromise was off the table. This wasn't just about protecting American industry, it was a declaration that the old rules of global commerce were dead, factories shuttered, supply chains fractured, and businesses worldwide were forced to rethink their strategies overnight. Even close allies like Japan, South Korea, and the EU faced a deal you can't refuse, accept a 15% tariff on all exports to the US, or face worse. Long-standing partnerships were suddenly on the brink, as allies struggled to adapt to the new reality. Any nation aligning with BRICS risked an extra 10% tariff, intimidation as policy. The administration drew a hard line, forcing countries to choose sides in a rapidly polarizing world. The world's reaction: disbelief, anger, and frantic recalculation as decades of alliances were torn up in favor of a zero-sum worldview. Governments called emergency meetings, and ordinary people watched in shock as the rules they'd relied on for years vanished overnight. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation that would shake the foundations of the global order, leaving everyone to wonder what the future of international cooperation would look like in this new, unpredictable era. Japan was cornered. Under threat of crippling tariffs, it agreed to invest $550 billion in the US by 2029, on America's terms. The US controlled 90% of the cash flow and dictated where the money went. For Japan, it was a national humiliation, sparking public outrage, and the resignation of Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. The deal turned Japanese capital into a slush fund for US industrial policy, with little benefit for Japan. The message to the world: resist and suffer, comply and lose sovereignty. This forced investment was a centerpiece of Trump's re-industrialize America push, but it was built on coercion, not partnership. For Japan, it triggered a deep debate about its alliance with the US and its future role in the world. The scars of this capitulation would last for years. South Korea, another key US ally, found itself hit with the same steep 15% tariff as other foreign competitors, despite its long-standing partnership with America. This came as a shock, especially since South Korean companies had already poured billions of dollars into building and expanding factories across the United States, creating thousands of American jobs and revitalizing local economies. But instead of gratitude for this investment, South Korean firms faced hostility. In a dramatic escalation, a raid on a Hyundai and LG plant in Georgia resulted in over 300 skilled Korean workers being detained, sending shockwaves through the business community. At the same time, the US government refused to grant essential work visas, leaving critical positions unfilled and halting key projects. Korean engineers and managers, vital to the smooth operation of these plants, were left stranded abroad. The message was clear: the US wanted the factories and the jobs, but not the foreign expertise that made them successful, a contradiction that threatened to undermine the very investments America had encouraged. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the European Union was also forced into a tough deal. Facing the same 15% tariffs, European leaders had little choice but to accept US terms. The agreement included $600 billion in new US investments in Europe, promising jobs and growth, but at a steep price. Europe also committed to buying $750 billion worth of American energy and signed massive military contracts, deepening its economic dependence on the US. Yet, even after these concessions, some European goods still face tariffs as high as 50%, making it nearly impossible for many businesses to compete in the American market. The EU's trade director openly admitted there were no real negotiations, just a list of US demands that Europe was forced to accept. America's closest allies now found themselves in a subservient position, paying tribute just to maintain access to US markets. This heavy-handed approach bred deep resentment, fueling protests, and a growing sense that Europe could no longer rely on its transatlantic partner for fair treatment. Old alliances, once built on trust and shared values, were now fracturing, replaced by a transactional coercive order that put power above partnership. The message from Washington was unmistakable. Partnership was out, submission was in. Across Europe and Asia, the backlash was only beginning to take shape. America's pressure didn't just force compliance, it sparked resistance. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, saw the writing on the wall. At a 2025 summit in Tianjin, they set aside old rivalries, especially between India and China, to build a multipolar world order. Their goal: create a parallel system, financial, political, and economic, free from US dominance. This wasn't about destroying the old system overnight, but building a viable alternative. Trump's tariffs, meant to isolate rivals, instead united them. The world was reorganizing, and Washington's grip was slipping. America First was fast becoming America Alone. The biggest challenge to US power came in finance. BRICS accelerated plans to bypass the dollar, trading in their own currencies and using China's payment system instead of SWIFT. They began dumping US Treasury bonds, a direct blow to American financial dominance. Meanwhile, Europe, forced into tighter economic ties, bought more US debt, deepening its dependency. The world was splitting, some breaking free from the dollar, others pulled deeper in. BRICS' move toward de-dollarization was no longer theory, it was policy. At a Rio summit, they condemned US tariffs and backed it up with action, building the infrastructure for a new global financial system. The era of dollar supremacy was under threat. America's economic weaponization was backfiring. The financial world was changing, fast. At home, the contradictions were glaring. The administration demanded foreign investment in factories, but attacked the very skilled workers and investors needed to make them succeed. The raid on the Hyundai and LG plant exposed a critical shortage of skilled labor, decades in the making. Instead of investing in training, Trump abolished the Department of Education, gutting the infrastructure needed for a manufacturing revival. The result: capital was forced in, but the workforce wasn't there. The rhetoric of bringing jobs home clashed with policies that alienated partners and workers. America First was creating a paradox, demanding investment while making the environment hostile for it. The promise of a manufacturing renaissance was undermined by self-inflicted wounds. So, what's next? As the world stands at a crossroads, the future of global order feels more uncertain than ever before. Trump's 2025 tariffs, designed to reassert US dominance in global trade, have instead accelerated a dramatic shift in the international landscape. Rather than restoring American primacy, these policies have triggered a wave of reactions that are reshaping the very foundations of global commerce and diplomacy. Traditional allies, once bound by trust and mutual benefit, now find themselves forced into deals they never wanted. Many are seeking strategic autonomy, determined to chart their own course and increasingly resentful of US coercion. Meanwhile, the BRICS bloc, galvanized by what they see as a common threat, has moved from talk to action. They are building an alternative financial system, one that is no longer just a theoretical possibility, but a necessity for their survival and growth. If this new system succeeds, it could spell the end of dollar dominance, ushering in a truly multipolar world where power is more evenly distributed and no single nation can dictate the rules. Old alliances are fracturing, and the world is splitting into rival blocs, each with its own interests and priorities. The sense of unity that once defined the post-war era is rapidly fading. The era of universal trade rules is over. Instead, competition, uncertainty, and volatility have become the new normal, affecting everything from markets to everyday life. In the end, the tariff strategy may be remembered more for the bridges it burned, diplomatic, economic, and social, than for the factories it built or jobs it promised. America's internal contradictions are also on full display. The country demands a resurgence in skilled manufacturing, yet simultaneously undermines education and the very workers it needs, revealing a deep and growing disconnect within its own borders. The world of 2025 is being redrawn along new and unpredictable fault lines. The global order as we once knew it will never be the same again. For better or worse, this is the real legacy of the so-called masterstroke. A world more divided, more complex, and more uncertain than ever before.